Hello, welcome to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Tuesday, December the 15th. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walton Jack Show, so we'll start off. Another crazy week in the world. The climate change conference is getting discussed. I think we're being told that, we've agreed to less than 2 degrees, which will hopefully save us from total and complete catastrophe. But what we hear from sources outside the mainstream media is that this is where the work starts. This is where we actually have to start doing something. The promises that have been made are really meaningless. So, here we are in Victoria. What can we do on the ground? It seems to me that the first thing that should happen is that the planned Mackenzie Street overpass should immediately be cancelled, and that $90 million taken and put into a very cheap train system from the western communities to downtown. Now we have the E&N line. They deliberately took out the rail bridge so that we can't do it from the western communities to downtown. But if we have $90 million that won't be spent on the Mackenzie overpass, then we may be able to fix up the line, build some stations, double track in a few places. If any of this makes any sense, maybe this is a stupid idea in the first place, but it seems that it's because otherwise, what's it all about? If we now build the Mackenzie Street overpass, when we're saying at the same time we have to massively reduce, then what's it all about?
Yeah, I'm not sure that the Mackenzie Avenue overpass is actually going to reduce traffic congestion. It seems to me whenever you make traffic flow a little faster here, it just builds up a couple of blocks away in another place. Like how much traffic can go into downtown at one time? There's only so much traffic can go into town and also leave. So it might relieve a little bit of congestion, but it's certainly they're spending a lot of money on it. Now I just read that there's going to be issues around fares for taking buses, and you're no longer going to be able to get transfers and things of that nature. It's going to become more expensive to take the bus. That's the absolute backwards way to do it. How about just simply subsidizing public transportation, Jack? How about just simply spending a little more money on it, keep the fares low, make it look attractive, put more buses on the main runs, especially coming in from Sydney and areas where there is heavy traffic from the western communities. Make those buses look attractive so people will really say, hey, it's cheaper to take the bus. And you take that congestion off the road.
And you've got to have rules on the buses. There have been some things happen recently on buses in Victoria that are really not at all pleasant and quite terrible. And the people who run the bus system seem to allow this to happen. There's no response. It's like, oh yeah, that's fine. It's the buses.
Yeah.
And really, that's not the way our bus system should be run. In fact, you can broaden that out to say that everything public in this corporate industrial world we live in, everything that's public is devalued.
Yeah.
I saw a sign the other day, it said, private property, you can't do this, that, or the other. Well, how about on public property? You can do whatever you want. And that's what they've deliberately done,
Yeah.
The people who run our country. And it's an ugly thing for them to do. And that's just one of the things we have to turn around. Los Angeles?
Yeah, well, there has been developments, always information leaking out about these massacres.
Just the fact that today Los Angeles closed their public school system.
And what was the threat? Did they say?
I don't know, but what I see is the deliberate ramping up especially by the American media and the Canadian media equally, the ramping up of fear of our Muslim friends and neighbors. That's what it comes down to. And I think it's deliberate. I think it's a smokescreen. I think we, not the Canadian people or the American people, but the government of America, with the full support of the Canadian media and the government of Canada under Harper, created ISIS and is now using that to create fear here. And behind that smokescreen They've got the TPP, which God knows what that's going to do to us. We've got Bill C-51. We've got genetically contaminated foods. We've got an economy that is being completely taken over by the 1% of the 1%. They're making all the money while the homeless roam the streets. And we can't deal with any of these things because we're focusing on their terror creation of ISIS. It's a bizarre situation.
You know, can you be blamed to wonder? Like I look at these stories and I see these shootings, and there's so many similarities in these massacres. And the one that happened in San Bernardino is no different. Like very strange reports where eyewitnesses are seeing like 3 tall Caucasian gunmen. And the official story, which is seemingly the major networks had from the start, was the 2 people, and one husband and wife, and of course the wife, the poor husband and wife that were shot dead later, and left their child parentless, who I believe were innocent. It just doesn't look like they could have even committed the crime, and I think it is. You have to wonder, Jack, and so many people say, "Oh, you're launching into these theories." Well, use your head. Who stands to really gain from these actions? And say, for instance, with the guns, there was a report immediately afterwards that they were found with police-issued firearms. That was some of the arms they were supposed to have. Then later there was reported that they had acquired some guns somewhere else. Well, what's the real story? And then we just had Mehdi Najari send us some information the other day about one of the guns that was found in the Paris shooting came from a gun shop in Florida, which is known as a kind of a CIA gun shop. And how would a gun shop that's been associated with the Ku Klux Klan and the National Rifle Association, how could that gun get into Paris, and what is it doing there? Now, another report also issued was that 7 of the guns that they retrieved from the most recent shootings in Paris originated from a gun dealer in Serbia, and he had sold the guns to that gun shop in the United States. So there's a connection there. Again, you just have to wonder what is going on. How are we going to really get to the truth here?
And the fact that we don't know the truth is being used against us. I mean, this creation of fear, with Donald Trump in the United States, the media is critical of him, but the media is the ones who have deliberately created this fear and anger within the American people. I mean, the people who actually believe CNN and NBC and all the rest of them, the people who believe the media, I mean, I can understand. They'd be afraid. I mean, they think ISIS is out to get them and all of this. They don't know that their own government is funding ISIS. They don't know that the Canadian government under Mr. Harper was involved. They don't know that the media lies to them about everything. So I understand their fear. Mm-hmm. And then Mr. Trump runs on that and builds it. And I mean, the world has to do better now. We're in a serious environmental crisis on many fronts. And for us to be focused in on yet another war caused by our rulers is an insane way to go, but we don't seem to be able to get around it.
Well, it's one element is an information war, isn't it? All these events, ISIS included, all the information that's coming to us, or for the most part, is coming from the corporate media, and they're creating a narrative about terrorism and how we have to fight terrorism and all that. And there was some stories, and some people were talking about, for instance, the support of Donald Trump, who's hateful. He's really like a Nazi, He's just a nasty, nasty person, very racist, very repugnant person. Have you ever heard him speak? But a high percentage of Americans really think he's a great guy. Now the problem is that how could they come to that analysis? They think he's so wonderful. Well, it's almost like they live within this. When they're like within an echo chamber. They only hear back what they are saying to each other. and they're impervious to information. They're impervious to, further broadening the scope of the discussion. They're locked into that paradigm, and I think it's the fear that has locked them up. And I think it's a strategy. Make people fearful enough, they'll just seem to become very close-minded, and all of a sudden be willing to give up their civil liberties, support all sorts of draconian laws like Bill C-51 and all that. See where this is all sort of going? That's why I always say, now isn't the time to, duck under the radar and not criticize. We all have to stand up, I think, right now, question our authorities, question the people that are pulling this stuff off, like what's happened in BC here with the couple that was supposed to have tried to bomb the legislature, which is a trumped up story, Jack. There's nothing to it.
I agree.
There's no substance to that story, and we have to say, well, this looks a lot like the San Bernardino case. A couple that was, vulnerable, easy to frame. Who knows for sure what happened in the United States and if they were approached or not. Yeah. But I think they were truly framed in this couple in the States. And unfortunately, they're dead. And so there's not going to be any trial. There's not any further investigations. And probably the biggest problem is how do we investigate the investigators? Yeah. We don't have anyone to go to bat for us. For instance, to challenge our own police here in Canada, the RCMP and CSIS, to really challenge them to produce the sort of evidence that's needed for us to say, oh, okay, you have something. Because all that evidence could be so easily fabricated, and there's no way for us to check it.
And the same goes for our governments. And like Christy Clark, I saw something, an interview, her and Tom Fletcher of Victoria News, talking about LNG, and it was horrendous. The oh, how wonderful LNG is going to be, says Christie, without ever mentioning the poisoning of the province that will take place, that is already taking place because of the LNG industry we already have, and the massive increase, the poisoning of our water, the poisoning of our land, the poisoning of people, the flooding of Site C, it's all part of it. It's completely ludicrous, and yet it carries on. Work is taking place on Site C right now. Is the NDP saying anything? I don't know. The media is kind of quiet about it. It's not big news, and yet they tell us that, the next plane carrying Syrian refugees is going to be landing next Tuesday. This is breaking news or something on the CBC. They're putting this huge focus on that issue and hiding and that's the way the media operates. Crime, violent crime, sports, lies, misinformation, and behind all of that, they basically have taken over our country. They've created the homeless. They've created the poverty. They've severely damaged not only our healthcare industry, but our health. They've attacked our health. They attack us on all fronts. And at the moment, we're still powerless against them. It's a horrendous situation.
Well, nobody's really answerable to the decisions, and this Liberal government is so removed from reality, and the whole LNG program is fraught with so many economic problems. It's just not viable economically. Australia has been developing natural gas 10 years earlier than us. They're in trouble. They have no market for their product. And, the same thing with the oil industry right now. $35 a barrel for oil. They're in trouble. There's no market. And to pretend there is, and by the way, the deals the Liberals signed with these foreign ownership and everything like that is pretty well sold us down the road. So it'd be wonderful if it just completely crashed. We might have a chance to recoup something. But, there's that force that the corporate, sector has to control that information, and it gets us into a lot of trouble, as like we are with the sewage treatment plant here in Victoria, where it just seems to be unstoppable. It makes no sense in so many levels, but that doesn't seem to matter.
Yeah. The Blue Bridge is exactly the same, and on and on. Which brings us again back to the media. Do people have a right to some honest information about, if you take take the issue of genetically engineered foods. An important issue because it involves, I think, the poisoning of us. I remember when those foods were brought in, it was done in complete secrecy. Nobody even knew those foods were in our food supply until a few years after they'd been brought in, and you started to hear rumors about, there's this new thing called genetically engineered foods. That was done, I guess, under the Chrétien government largely. Mm-hmm. What a betrayal of, not only by our governments, but by the media to allow this to happen in complete secrecy. And they do it on every issue. That's an older issue. But you take the issues of today, and genetically modified, genetically contaminated foods are still an issue today because we're eating them every day. It's never mentioned in the media. Because it's all corporate. The corporations own our governments. The corporations own the media. And they run this country as if it was their kingdom, which in fact it is. And that is the fundamental issue that we've somehow got to come to terms with and deal with, because really it's at the point where, everybody's life is at stake. The economy, the environment, society itself, all in the state of...
Well, I think you have to remain vigilant, and I'm so used to just now looking at everything, whatever's coming in, and think about the spin that's on that. I was listening to a show yesterday on CBC with Anna Maria Tremonti. They were talking about autism, and they were interviewing a guy about saying that autism is not necessarily a disease, it's just a new way of being. Okay, that's nice. And look, people are suffering from autism, and it is a very serious phenomenon. Now, my sister, or my wife is a teacher, and she started teaching in around 1990, or 1985, so she's been at about 30 years. Autism was almost unheard of in 1985. It was about 1 in 10,000. Now it's in 1 in 60 children.
That's what they say.
So, we're talking about an explosion of an epidemic of autism. Autism is a disease of the brain. It's not a new way of being. It's an illness, a physical illness, a debilitating illness that's, costing sadness and suffering and the cost of so many lives. But the thing about the story is how they were presenting it on CBC, as should be coming to accept autism. Now, we certainly want to support people who are suffering from that illness and do everything we possibly can. But let's not pretend what we're into here. We're into an epidemic, and it's a very, very serious thing, and we should be looking for the causes of autism and not be accepting it. That's just one example, Jack, of how the media has this way of twisting and spinning stories and getting us away from really focusing on what we should be focusing on.
Yeah. And I think what we have to be focusing on is the retaking of power into our hands, away from the corporations, putting our politicians back in a situation where they have to work for us, not betray us every day, but work for us. And if they don't work for us, they're fired. But somehow we've lost all the power. Today, I think the Truth and Reconciliation Commission has released a report talking about the residential schools largely, and what a disaster that was. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed how, once again, the media has completely escaped any responsibility or blame for that scourge. All the suffering and trouble that caused. The media knew about that from the beginning. and they kept it quiet because the people who run the country wanted to, I guess, destroy the culture of the First Nations people and simply get rid of them because they, our rulers, wanted the land that the First Nations people are living on. So they did this residential school things. The media, their media, they knew about it, they kept it quiet, and they do the same thing today. Their job is to manipulate us and control us, and they do their job very well. But if we want to survive on this planet, then we've got to change things.
And the Catholic Church, you know, has been criticized, of course, but they've come out pretty well unscathed from all this. You know, they played a major role in residential schools. And, you know, if you look at that, and that's, you know, the cultural, the imperialism that was involved in the, and the attempt that they were trying to do is they were trying to destroy a culture. They were trying to destroy the First Nations sense of nationhood. And this, I don't think this was an accident. There was one of the main people involved in that study, and I don't remember his name. The judge said that, you know, there's tens of thousands of deaths that weren't recorded from residential schools, and they've only been recording the ones that they know of. It was a genocide, and you know, we should be looking at how we've been using the institutions like churches to do this dirty business. You know, the Catholic Church still has so much to answer for in this case.
Yeah, Walter, thank you very much. Yeah.
Always a pleasure, Jack.
Interesting times, as they say, to be living in. Thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back. This is December 15th, 2015. I'd like to thank the volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this program happen every week. Our guest in this segment is Vic Derman, and we're going to be talking about sewage treatment. Vic, you were on the show a few weeks ago, and you were bringing a motion forward to the Sewage Treatment Committee,
Yep.
asking them to basically, as you've been doing for a long time, open the process up to just to what's out there, the technologies that are out there. So how did that go?
I guess not well, Jack. The motion was defeated by the committee, and they declined to do what I had requested.
And can you I probably didn't explain your request
Oh,
well.
no, well,
so.
quite well. You know, basically, we have goals in the project, 5 or 6 goals. Meet federal regulations, do the project at the lowest possible cost to the taxpayer, net cost, maximize resource recovery, maximize response to climate change. Well, what I've been saying for a long time is, okay, what you do then is you go out to industry in what's called a request for expressions of interest or similar, and you basically say, these are our goals. This is what we want to accomplish. What's your best answer? So that you get a lot of very good minds in a lot of places really thinking about it and coming up with a variety of solutions that you can then pick the best from.
And so I live in Victoria,
Yeah.
and I know we have 4 city councillors on
Yeah.
this committee. Did they support your
No,
motion?
none of them did, actually.
I'm very disappointed over the years in our Victoria councillors that have been on this committee, because they've moved us steadily ahead in direction. Because my feeling is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that had we built the original plan, which was stopped because Esquimalt wouldn't let it be built in Esquimalt, we were going to spend about $1 billion for virtually no environmental benefit. We were taking the problem we were putting into the ocean, bringing it onto the land, and having to deal with it here.
We were projected to spend around $800 million, although final bids may have made that somewhat lower or somewhat higher. The problem was that you're right, and in my view, we really weren't going to get much net environmental benefit. Yes, we would get some benefit in the ocean, although the problem isn't huge there at the current time. But in turn, we would have issues of pollution of the airshed potentially, pollution of various streams, creeks, having to dispose of material, use cost of energy, The 800 million was, of course, just capital cost. Then you have to operate it, and the life cycle cost for 30 or 40 years was over $2 billion, which is substantial. So maybe, where are we at this time around?
Yes.
I'd hope that as we reconstituted at the start of this year, and new members of the committee, new people elected, and so forth, that we might come up with a better result. Well, we hired a consultant to provide us with 4 options. And those options came in to us about a week ago. And they range in cost from $1 billion to 1.3. Now, the problem is, back sometime, we asked the public about sites. And first of all, the municipalities provided some sites that were potentially available. And I don't have a problem with that. If they had been these are sites that could be used, but if somebody has something better, then we'll switch to that. At the behest of the chair of the committee, we went out to the public at a big meeting in Ocean Point and asked them to pick what they thought was the best site. They had almost no information on what it would cost, no information on what would go on that site, and so forth. So at that meeting, I was there, and I had a lot of people come up to me and say, "What are you asking me? Sorry, I have no information. How can I give you a good answer?"
Yes. I was at the meetings, and that's how I felt.
Exactly, and a lot of people expressed that to me. Well, some people tried to do what we said, and they tried to pick a site. And they picked, as their number 1 choice, Rock Bay. Probably because it's in an industrial area, and it seemed at least intrusive of what might be available. But they had no knowledge of cost or what would go on it or whatever. So we get these 4 options, and they all have Rock Bay in it. The first one is for a single plant at Rock Bay at cost of somewhere around $1 billion. Now, the cost just to get the sewage from Clover Point to Rock Bay and from Esquimalt to Rock Bay and back again is $250 million just to build the pipes and the necessary pump stations and so forth. And that's called conveyance. $250 million just that. One of the things when I brought my motion
Because
forward,
now everything goes to Clover Point
and to Macaulay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so now we have to bring them from there to Rock Bay and back.
Yeah, and you probably have to tear up Cook
$250
Street or
million,
whatever
right.
for a considerable period of time. Rock Bay is in every option. So even when you're looking at an option of 7 distributed plants, it really isn't a distributed option because Rock Bay is there.
Right.
And even with 7 plants, the cost of getting sewage to Rock Bay and back is still $170 million. It's only gone down somewhat, but it's still this huge number. Well, when I brought the motion to the committee, one of the things I said was, there are a lot of possible savings in things like conveyancing. If you manage to locate this where you don't have to build that, you potentially could save a lot of money. I hadn't seen the figures at that time. Well, when I saw the figures, yeah, there's $250 million cost right there. So here we are with one consultant trying their best, I'm sure, but who doesn't necessarily represent all the best and leading edge ideas in the field, trying to come up with some solutions. And I'm not comfortable that what they've come up with are the best possible solutions.
Which is a huge problem because we're looking at spending huge amounts of money and we've got to get this right. And that's ignoring the fact that the ocean really doesn't do that bad a job.
Yeah, no, it doesn't actually.
And we're going to have to do a good job in what we build to match that.
Well, I think we can do better. What I've been trying to get the committee to look at is the fact that we can recover resources and make money out of that, especially on the solid side, although there is some recover possibility on the liquid side. You get the biosolids that you can put through a gasifier, and you can get heat from that, and you can also get a gas that can be used as a fuel in a variety of ways and so forth that you can sell, even on today's market. And as energy gets more and more expensive because of climate change and carbon taxes, you can probably do even better. But beyond that, what you could do is you could integrate other parts of the solid waste stream. You could take the kitchen scraps, or a good part of them, and you can put them through the gasifier. and generate again additional resources. You could probably take a fair amount of the solid waste going into Heartland and put that through the gasifier. Now we're starting to look at some real money because we're getting more and more resources and more heat from it that can be used and more potential or gas that can be put to a variety of uses.
So you think there's an option out there that can
There
do
may
a
well
lot better?
be.
Yeah.
I can't say for sure,
Okay.
but I think it's quite likely that there is.
And you would just like to have
Look
it
at it.
open
You
to
see,
these options. I don't get why we
if
can't
we were
do
to
that.
design something like that, and if it worked out, you have the value of the resources you create, and that's worth money. You have the value of avoided infrastructure, because instead of having to build one facility for kitchen scraps and one for sewage and so forth, you maybe can do it with one set of infrastructure. That's value. And then you have another source of income that you can transfer into the project, and that's the tipping fees. Right now, people are paying money to get rid of their kitchen scraps. Victoria and Esquimalt and Oak Bay are paying $149 a ton to get rid of their kitchen scraps. Saanich is paying a little less. We have a different arrangement, still over $100 a ton, or in that range. So if you're going to put the kitchen scraps in the gasifier, people are still able to get rid of their kitchen scraps. So maybe you charge them $85 a ton, or maybe just a flat $100 a ton, which is a saving to them. And you then have a revenue stream there. If you are charging people $109 a ton to dump things into Heartland. So fine, charge them $100 a ton and put it in a gasifier.
So a lot of this depends on what's called gasification. And
well, it could
is
be
that,
gasification.
could be, or there's
there
other
are
options.
other
So
options.
at least we should be looking for the best.
Absolutely, because I know there's one company that has said that they would use this kind of approach, and that their absolute cost to the taxpayer would be $250 million or less. Now, I don't know that they're necessarily right on that, but they may well be.
And we should look into
Of
it.
course we should.
And we haven't.
And we haven't.
Okay.
Not properly.
So there
no.
were going to be some public meetings right about now on moving this to the next step, but those have been canceled. Maybe you can just bring us
Well,
up
they've
to
been
date.
postponed,
Sorry,
actually. Yeah. A couple of reasons. One, the holiday time is not the best time. You know, we're in the Christmas season. That's not the best time to say to people, come on out and talk sewage. You know, you're not going to get the response. But beyond that, I think the committee, at least a lot of members on it, felt that this information was not ready. There were too many things in the estimates that came in, figures that seemed to be controversial, didn't seem to be accurate and so forth, that people said, you know, we need to make sure that this is right, you know, just on these particular options.
So where do we go to get information? We just
Well, CRD has a website.
Okay.
And so you can go to the CRD website and it will lead you to the sewage treatment.
I've been there once or twice. I haven't
But-
gotten very far in. I mean,
Yeah.
is it a easy and clear path?
The website isn't the easiest, but I think you'll find your
Okay.
way. But the, you know, even things like the flow numbers seem to be questionable compared to past estimates. There were things in there like the cost of gasification was estimated between about $300 to $400 million, or 260 to $400 million capital cost. I've come to know gasification reasonably well over the last number of years. I suspect anybody who knows it well would say we can do that gasification project for well under $100 million. You know,
So we're
that's a
seeing
big
number
number.
changes. Vic, we're out of time. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Jack. Always is.
Yeah, and still, we've got to do this right, folks, and it's up to us. Thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back. This is December 15th, 2015. Our guest in this segment is Norm Ryder. Norm has been on the show a few times before. We've talked about your experiences with WorkSafe BC, formerly the Workers' Compensation Board. You were injured at work and have fought a long fight, like many others have to, against an organization that's quite remarkable in what it is. So maybe you can just bring us up to date on what you've been through.
Well, I was really hoping that I'd be able to come in and say, Jack, after 5 years, we finally have a settlement. but unfortunately, no. That actually December 13th, last Sunday, was the 5th anniversary of filing my claim. And about all that has really been accomplished, in a sense, is the claim is more complex and a harder battle to fight now than it was when I made it. Mind you, I've also learned a lot about how WorkSafe operates and how many other people are like me that are having their own issues dealing with WorkSafe. And I did learn that WorkSafe is quite a company. It's a Crown corporation that returns a profit of approximately 30% a year to themselves. Their top 20 executives get over $6.5 million. They have
So that's an average of $300,000 each?
The CEO reports $550,000. Now there may be more, I don't know. And they have they have 600 employees that are making over $100,000 a year. Now that's twice what the maximum of the few workers that do get the maximum. That's twice what an injured worker can get. The medical doctors involved in creating reasons to deny a claim, the one that I dealt with, I gather he gets about $200,000 a year to work part-time. And you can't communicate with WorkSafe. They just keep pulling back. I've tried sending emails, I've tried sending letters to them. Well, they take the letter and they file it, and that's it. Which is really one of the techniques that a lot of large companies and organizations are doing, is when you do write a letter into them, that if you're disagreeing with them, they just don't respond. Even if you've got the scientific facts to support the situation, you just hear nothing from them if you disagree with them. You're not allowed to.
Now, if somebody is working construction and they get injured at work and break a leg, I have a feeling that WorkSafe is fine with that, for this person to be off work until they're back. But in things like long-term injuries...
Well, I wouldn't even say they're necessarily good there. A friend of mine broke his ankle. It took over a year. WorkSafe kept trying to send him to other people to get diagnosed, or he did go to them, but he finally had to go to a specialist to find out how to get a special diagnosis on it. And WorkSafe tried to stop him after a year from going to get a special type of CAT scan. So, no, they're not necessarily even good with relatively simple, obvious injuries.
What is WorkSafe's job? I mean, what are they, not what they say they're there for, which is, I guess, to protect the worker, but what do you think they're really there for?
I'm a little puzzled, because I know that for small companies, they aren't there to help the small company. Most small employers are equally unhappy with WorkSafe. Maybe the big employers are happy that they're protected. I don't know.
Now, they're protected because no matter what happens at work, you cannot go after your employer, right? WorkSafe is in the middle between
WorkSafe
an injured...
is a no-fault insurance company. And by no fault, they mean you can't go after the employer. All the fault gets shifted back to the worker.
Right. Now, your injury was an electromagnetic radiation injury, and I have a feeling they don't want to admit that can be a problem whatsoever, so they'll just never admit it. Doesn't matter what the science says.
Oh, they will admit it. I haven't stopped. No, actually, I found that they don't even investigate electromagnetic injuries properly. That I know I've got several people that have contacted me, and their injuries are very close to the antenna, where there's a special way you have to measure the radiation in that area, and they don't measure it properly. They don't even acknowledge what they call near-field radiation, where the BC Centre for Disease Control says in the near-field radiation zone, the radiation pattern is very chaotic. You get massive spikes that just take you way over anything even reasonably close to safe.
Take something like cashiers who were forced at at work to stand for hours on end, often on concrete floors or very hard floors. This can't be good for people's health, and we know it isn't, and yet WorkSafe doesn't step in to help them.
No, and a lot of them may get, shall we say, a long-term disability, but many cashiers aren't on full-time, so they won't even get that. They just get pushed out. They've sold their body to the company. They're
Yeah, it just
no
seems
use
like
to anyone.
that's, I mean, why not act to protect people from these kinds of injuries? What's wrong with the people who run all of our grocery stores and supermarkets? I'm sure the bosses of all those companies are happily seated in the best chairs money can buy, but they force their cashiers to stand hour after hour when it's absolutely unnecessary. And I understand that in Europe that's not the case. In Europe, you know, people are treated at work better. But I'm not sure if you want to talk about what a citizen can do to get better treatment by government and agencies, or?
Well, I'm beginning to think maybe the only way is for citizens to band together and to have actually take a class action against the government, because an individual on their own can't fight the government. And that's really why, shall we say, I've been slowly collecting a number of injured workers together, and I think we're getting close to having a class action that we can actually have. There's a lot of work to organize a class action, but it just may be the only way to communicate with the government and WorkSafe that they've got to follow the normal rules instead of the special laws that WorkSafe has to justify not helping people.
So the class action would be along the lines of?
Mainly the way they are confusing the claims and taking wrong pieces of information, putting them in the claim, not investigating the claim, either how the injury occurred or the proper diagnosis of the injured worker.
So WorkSafe is kind of judge, jury, and?
Well, that's the frustrating part when you go in, that you have a claims manager who, we'll call him the police officer doing the investigation. Then he switches hats and becomes the prosecutor. Then he switches hats and becomes the judge. And then he becomes the executioner. And then you appeal against the same group of people. That you just can't, they've got the system set up so you're not allowed to win.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure you're not. I'm sure you're not. Well, I you know, WorkSafe is something that, I mean, it operates almost in secret. Nobody ever hears about it, but the people who get involved with it know about it. And really, you know, I think there should be just a public inquiry of what goes on there, and just shine a light on it and try to make it better. I mean, you listen to our politicians on television and radio, they just don't care.
Well, you know, WorkSafe and probably BC Hydro's the same way. I really recommend that people go and get their annual report and read the annual report about the company. Actually, they report a lot of the stuff they're doing. You just have to read it, and 200-300-page annual report's not fun to read.
Well,
Trust me on
thought.
that.
Let's move on. You wanted to talk a little bit about just sustainable environments.
Yes, I was thinking after the talks in Paris that we're not going to hit the 2%, certainly not the 1.5% reduction. That's not going to happen. As long
The
as
1.5 degrees Celsius temperature
Yeah.
rise.
That's not going to happen. That as long as we're building more roads, we're going to put more cars on the roads. And I used to build roads. I enjoy building roads. That's great fun. It's just a kid playing with the toys in the sandbox. But we've got to stop building roads. We've got to start looking at other situations. That we can't just keep loading the roads up with cars. It's not working. That it's going to take a lot of change and a lot of thought. Actually, coming back to the class actions, I went to the smart meter class action in Vancouver with a person. And
now that was just filed a few days ago, right?
No, the certification hearing just happened last week.
So the judge was going to say, yes, you can be a class action.
That's correct.
Okay.
But what I brought that up for was that she was talking about taking a car over the city centre of Vancouver and all the hassles that was going to be, and pointed out the simplest thing is take the ferry across, you take the bus and the SkyTrain, you're into downtown Vancouver, basically right at the courthouse where the hearing was held.
Right.
And it's quicker than you could drive a car. You probably be able to find a parking spot for that. And it costs, I think, $3.75 each way,
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
which you can't beat that.
No.
And
But a
we
lot of
took one
people
car
do.
off the road.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, we're going to have to take a lot of cars off the road. In terms of the climate change agreement in Paris, I don't know if anybody here is yet ready to actually have to stop driving their car because of that agreement. But that's what we have to do. If we can't do that, then everything else is just a joke, and we're destroying the future.
Well, that's it. I mean, that's just one part of sustainable environment that we've got to start looking at a lot of these things. And if each of us do one thing a day to enhance the sustainable environment, we'd actually get a lot done. We're not going to make a big change, but one change a day for each person will start adding up.
Okay, we're on our way.
Yeah.
Thank you, Norm.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. And the next segment is going to be a video of a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Shapira, and talking about something I think you'll find very interesting. Thanks for watching.
Kairos Victoria, along with the Victoria chapter of Independent Jewish Voices and UVic's Social Justice Studies program, are proud to sponsor this important conversation tonight with our honored guest, Jonathan Shapira. The organizers of this event know that conversations like the one we're about to have here tonight are critical to deepening our understanding of the crisis in Israel-Palestine. Because the information we get from mainstream media sources does not always accurately reflect the reality of life under occupation, it's even more important that we have opportunities to engage with people who know firsthand what life is like for all who call Israel, Palestine home. Friends, let us welcome Jonathan Shapira to Victoria.
Although I feel that you are in some kind of sympathetic, I want to say again that everything that I'm going to say, and some of it will be quite hard things against my country, is out of love to the people who live there, regardless their religion, regardless their ethnic background, Israelis, Palestinians, Jews, Christians, Muslims, and any other religions. I can say that I really came from the very hardcore Zionist family, Zionist background, Zionist movement. And I grew up in this kind of atmosphere, this kind of education and upbringing. And I went through kind of a transformation from an obedient Zionist soldier that believed the system and feel comfortable with it to someone that is still caring a lot about my country and my people, but in a totally different way. Just a week ago, exactly on Thursday night, in Aida refugee camp, which is in Bethlehem. Those of you that are connected to the Kairos initiative and spend time in Bethlehem, it's just there in Bethlehem, connected to right next to not far from the center. A border police jeep entered the refugee camp at night, and the officer was reading this message in the megaphone. And I'll read you the English translation. He was shouting it in Arabic. People of Aida refugee camp, this is the Israeli army. You throw stones and we will hit you with gas until you all die. We won't leave any of you alive. We have arrested one of you. We took him from his home, and we will slaughter and kill him while you watch. If you keep throwing stones, go home, or we will gas you until you die. Your family, your children, everyone, we will kill you. Well, it's not the official line of the Israeli government, but I think a day after, or when the video was published, he was suspended. I don't know if he's still suspended or he's back in service. Nevertheless, the next day or 2 days later, not so far from there, in another village, a Palestinian child, 8 months old, a baby, suffocated to death from the gas that they shot on the civilians. Just to bring us to the reality on the ground over there. It's happening right now as we speak. People are being killed, humiliated and oppressed on a daily basis. And I think it's important to realize that we are all part of it. Even people that live in Victoria, you are citizens of a country that support that. I know that you got rid of someone that was very supportive. But we don't know the next guy if he's just talking nicely or if he really can change something. From little things I heard here and there, it doesn't seem much different. So it's really up to us and up to you here to change the policy of your country. Canada in the latest years was even more supportive of the government of Israel than the United States. Canadian companies are involved directly and indirectly with the occupation and operation on the West Bank of different companies. There is armed trade between the countries, and that should stop. That should come to an end, and it's up to you here in different organizations, and some of them I just learned to know about when I came here, to come up with creative ideas and initiatives. And I will talk a little bit more about the BDS movement that I'm part of now. Basically, the main idea of that movement is that everyone can be part of the struggle. You don't have to be a soldier or a pilot that will refuse, that will go to demonstration in the West Bank in order to affect the situation. You can live in the beautiful, peaceful Victoria city or Vancouver Island and actually be essential part of the struggle for liberation. When the power of balance is so huge, when the power imbalance is so huge, when there's one side very strong with super big equipped army with so many different ammunition and helicopters and plane and tanks, and the other side is so weak, violence most of the time will help the strong side, and everything will use as an excuse to even intensify the oppression and do much more harm. I'm not from here, from my position as a privileged Israeli, white, Jew, ex-military, living safely, relatively in Tel Aviv, I will not tell the Palestinian people how to resist the injustice, how to resist the oppression. What I can do is to choose what kind of struggle I join. And I choose the nonviolent struggle in the form of boycott, divestment, and sanctions. For me, it was mostly the assassination policy, where the Air Force started to send Apache helicopters, F-16 fighter jets to attack Palestinian suspects in Gaza and in the West Bank. If I need to put the finger of one specific thing, was a specific attack on Gaza where they bombed with a one-ton bomb the house of Salah Shehadeh in July 2002 in the middle of the night. 15 people got killed in a second, among them 9 children and babies, and collateral damage of 150 people injured around, a big hole in the ground in the most dense populated place, one of the most densely populated places in the world. And it's a long story, but together with other pilots, we drafted the letter saying that we are going to refuse not just to fly over Gaza, but to refuse to be in any way part, directly or indirectly, part of the ongoing occupation, the oppression of the Palestinian people. The letter was published in 2003. I was part of an organization that today I see as a terror organization that inflicts so much pain and suffering on so many people, and indirectly inflicts so much pain and suffering on also the Israeli people. But the process continued for me, and I felt that it's not a balanced situation. It's not two groups fighting against each other with equal forces. It's an oppressor and oppressed. It's an occupier and occupied. It's a colonizer and the native fighting against each other. One with one of the biggest armies, or the strongest army, at least in the region, and one with almost nothing. And at that point, I realized that I need to not join the struggle of the Palestinian people. And that's quite a big shift. I think from saying yes to saying no in the military, then to be a leader or a founder member or like activist in an organization that struggle in the way I told you, to someone that follows actually the Palestinian initiative for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, it's quite a strong, quite a big change of mindset. So in 2009, together with other Israeli citizens, we formed this group that is called Boycott from Within. It has many names that are too long, but basically we are Israeli citizens that support the Palestinian call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, the Palestinian call for BDS. As I started a few minutes ago and said that you are also involved and you are also part of the occupation. And if you find where your links, your connections to this dynamic, where you can actually not buy something, go to a vigil, join some petition, be active also in things locally here that has to do with the horrible policy of your own government towards the people here and towards the land and toward the environment, then I believe that there is a chance for improvement in this world. But thank you very much, and we'll go on.